Yeah, good Erev Shabbos. We're up to Daf. Today's Daf is Tesvav. We're up to Yudalad Amid Beis, and the Gemara gets a little lighter now. The Mishnah had mentioned that if you go into the Azara and you Tameh, you have Karis. What constitutes the Azara is the dimensions of the Beis Hamikdash. The Mishnah noted that you're able to add on to the dimensions of the Beis Hamikdash, but provided you needed a few components. You needed a king, you needed Urim V'Tumim, you needed a Bezdin, and you need Shtei Chalois. So the Gemara is going to discuss that. So much lighter daf than what we've been learning the last few days. 2 lines from the bottom on your Dalit on mid-base. Echad Nichlas Azara. Now, so Menani Mili, how do you know that what you need all these components? How do you know you need all these things that we mentioned? Rav Simi Barchia, the Amakra, it says V'asli Migdash v'shachati b'saycham kichol asher nimaru ischa. Should make me a Migdash. I'll dwell in it, and anything that I show you as tabnis hamishkan v'es tabnis kol kelev. Notice it goes from guys. It says Migdash and it goes to Mishkan. It's synonymous, right? The beginning of the pasuk V'asli Migdash, and then it says what? Al tabnis hamishkan, because the Taka is speaking about the Mishkan. It says v'chein ta'asu, and so thou shall do. Says Rashi, what does v'chein ta'asu mean? Kroy yisera lemedrash ledoiros. It's a kroy yisera not just for b'mei Moshe, but to go ahead and for future generations. U'b'mei Moshe dehu melech v'navi v'achiv kohen gadol v'urim v'tumim v'shivim zekanim, and the 70 and the 70 Zekanim, right? So Megash says that it was Moshe Rabbeinu was equal to the 70. We saw in Sanhedrin, the Mishnah said Moshe was equal to the 71. Okay, Masav Rava. It says Kol HaKelim she'asu Moshe, all the kelim that Moshe made Meshichasan Mikatchan. The Meshicha with the Shemen and Mishkan gave him what the kedusha of Klisharis. We mentioned many times, fellas, that the Klisharis had the capacity to infuse kachei haguf, right? It would go ahead and be able to give you what, right? Not just kedushas damim, but kedushas haguf. It had that capacity. Now, in order to get that kedusha, Moshe went ahead and was magdaship with the Shemen HaMishcha, that went ahead and gave it, infused it with that capacity. Mikan ve'elech, future generations, avodasan minchat chasam, future generation, it was their avoida that was mechanech them. In other words, just you began using them. When you began using them, right, the action of beginning, that would go ahead and give them its kedusha. Look at Rashi. Rashi tells you some very interesting. Mikan ve'elech kli adoris like nimshechu. The future generations were not anointed with the Shemen HaMishcha. El haschalas avodasan mechan chasam lekedusha. The beginning of their use was mechanech them. The chinuch lashon haschala. People think chinuch means teaching. That chinuch means haschala, right? You're being maskal. You're beginning. Chanukas habayis, Chanukas hamizbeach means it's the beginning of the bayis, the beginning of the mizbeach. By Avram Avinu as Chanchav, it's because Eliezer in Yudalit, I think in Bereshis, he says V'yarik es Chanichav. There's mechanchim b'mitzvahs. He put him on mahalach. That's the lashon of chinuch. Chinuch is the lashon of aschala. It's the beginning of something. So the beginning of its usage was mechanechet. Fred the Gemara, the Amai. Why does it say as tabis hamishkan v'chein ta'asu? V'neima v'chein ta'asu l'doiros. In other words, the future generations, you should also go ahead and need, again, if you say v'chein ta'asu, that what they did in the Mishkan is exactly what they're going to do in the future. So it should be necessary to go ahead and have the Shemen HaMishkan in the future to go ahead and infuse the Kalim with the capacity to go ahead and create Kedushas HaGuf. Why would Mechinech? Why would that be? If you're telling me V'chein Tasu is reflective of not just the Mishkan but the future, let's extend it to as well to the capacity for the Kalim. Shiny Hassam, it's different by the Kalim Damakra, because the pasuk says. The pasuk says, Vayhi biyom kalas Moshe lokim es hamishkan vayimshach esay vayikadesh esay ves kol kelav ves hamizbeach ves kol kelav vayimshachem vayikadesh oisam. He anointed them. Vayikadesh oisam. Oisam b'mashicha v'loy ledoris b'mashicha. It's a miyot. In other words, ein achinami v'chein tasus future generations. However, vis-a-vis the kli shares, we have a miyot that dafka that generation of Moshe required hamshacha. Future generations not. It says oisam b'mashicha v'loy ledoris b'mashicha. Says the Gemara, Ema oisam b'mashicha ledoris oy b'mashicha oy b'avoida. Okay, why do you say only avoida? Why don't you say either or? Let's say either or, either Mashiach or Avoida, but lav dafka only Avoida. So Amar Papa Amakra, the pasuk says, it says V'lachu es kol klei hashares asher yushasu bam, and they took os kol klei hashares asher yushasu bam b'kodesh. So it's an extra word. It says kli kodesh asher yushasu bam. Talmud akasa b'sheirus. The Torah goes ahead what, and the lashon is telling you what, that the klishares is, there is a klishares that's al yedei sheirus. So what would that be? Future generations. Nahash the kasamana sharsu oisam lamali. So if you're telling me asher sharsu is for future generations, so you didn't need oisam. In other words, that generation of Moshe was what? Was vayim shachim, right? And future generations was what? Was kilei yisharsu. So why do you need oisam to be memayit, right? After that generation, when it says future generations, that say Yishar, so you know future generations al yedei usage, and not, says Gemara. And for the Gemara, Eloi Kaser Rachmana Oisam, if the Torah had not been Oisam, Havamina, I would have thought, Hani Chudim Mashicha. I would say that only those, that generation is Mashicha. However, L'doiros be Mashicha Uba Avoida. You know what I would have said? I would have said what? You need everything. Dechsev v'chein tasu, and then it says v'chein tasu. In other words, guys, it says like this: v'chein tasu. You would say, guys, look at me. V'chein tasu means al yedei what? Shemen mishcha. And then it says klisharis asher yisharshu. Future generations, not only in addition to mishicha, you would need sheirus. Therefore, it says oisam to limit mishicha to the generation of Moshe, or else future generations you would have said need both. Therefore, some limits it to the generation of Moshe. Very geschmack. Okay, now, so now we had Moshe Rabbeinu was the Melech, Moshe was the Navi, Moshe, according to Mikash, was the 70, and you had Aaron in the Urim V'Tomim, and you had Shtei Toidos. Okay, let's outside. A carbon toida was a special shlamim you bought on 4 occasions. Right, you survived a sickness, or you were going across the sea, or you let out of prison, or you were in the midbar and you survived that trip. So you bring out. This is the times where we go ahead and bisman hazeh we bench goimel. When you'd have the chiyuv to go ahead and bring the carbon toima, you bench goimel. The carbon toida is a shlamim with 2 exceptions. One, it's required accompanying it is with 4 types of leavened and unleavened bread. In other words, 3 matzos. We're going to see them, and chametz. 1 chal is chametz. Good. So you would have 4 types and 10 of each type. So 40 loaves, right? 30 of which are pesachdik, right? Gebroxt but pesachdik, and the challah for the. In addition, it's only eaten for a day or a night. Usually a shlamim, guys, is 2 days and a night. This is 1 day and a night. Says that there's the Ebenezer Gawai. Says since the Torah is bought for Simcha and you can only eat it for a day and a night, you're going to invite more people. We're going to have much more people come. In other words, you want to go ahead and profess your thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Carbon Torah. So therefore, it's only for a day and a night. You didn't have. If it was 2 days and a night, the same people could eat it. But now, since it's only a day and a night, therefore, you'd invite more people. That's the Carbon Torah. Now, of this Carbon Torah, it would accompany them around, walking around and expanding the Azaris in Yerushalayim. Now, what did they walk around with? It just says, it says Shtei Toidos. What did they walk around with? That's the question. It says the Gemara. Shtei Toidos, Tana, Shtei Toidos, Shamru, Bilachman, V'lo Bibsaran. You're speaking about what? The lechem You're speaking about the showbreads, not the showbreads, the breads, and you're not speaking about the meat. Minani mili. So Amar of Chisda Amar Kra. So this is a pasuk in Nehemiah. Says the pasuk, V'ala es Sara Yehuda me'al l'chayma v'amida shtei saydais gedoylois tu groisa toydais v'saluchais leyomim me'al l'chayma, and we ran around to the right from the city l'shar ashbais. In other words, they were increasing Yerushalayim, fellas. They weren't increasing the Beis Hamikdash, they were increasing Yerushalayim, and they were walking around with shtei toydais gedoylois v'salchais leyomin me'al l'chayma. My gedoylos, what do you mean groisa? Ilema mimin gadol mamish. If you're telling me the species of animal mamish, name a parim. Say what? Say oxen. That's the biggest animal you could bring. El gedoylos biminon. It means gedoylos in its min. Is there any chashivus in something that's bigger? Vatanya nema ba'olis behema isherech nechayach. Ba'elet ba'olis oif isherech nechayach. B'mincha isherech nechayach. The concept of the carbon is you're willing to give something to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As long it has nothing to do with what you give. After all, guys, Lashem Aretz Malaya, everything's the Rebbeinu Shalom's anyway. But it's indicative of what you're willing to give. So it has nothing to do. It can't be Gedolos means the biggest, because no one cares about that. Hashem doesn't care about that. No one cares about it. Hashem doesn't care about that. El Gedolos Shebetoida. You know what it means? It means the big part of the Toida. Umayniu. So again, guys, there are 40 what? There are 40, 4 types. Okay. Now, I'm just going to tell you outside what it's going to say. The measurement of how you go ahead and make it is what is a half went to the 3, and the other half went to the chalas. In other words, the chametz took up half of the amount of flour. The other 3 was only a half. They took a third of the half, whereas the challah, the chametz, took the whole half. So you see, it's the gedolos of the 4. Umayni is chametz. How do you know it's chametz? That nan hatoy the hoysa bo min chamesh soyin Yerushalayim shein sheis midbariyos. They added a 5th. They added another part, a 6th. Shein shtei eifos, which total 2 eifos, eifos shalosh soyin. Esrim isorin asar lachametz ve'asar. So it was 2 esroinim, 20 esroinim, asara lechametz, asara went to chametz, and 10 went lematzah. So what do you see? You went ahead and it got half for the chametz. Uvematzah sholish minim chalois, rekikin, and revuchin. And there are 3 types. There's chalois, rekikin, and revuchin. These are all chalois here. It's not chametz. It means a matzah. So you had 3 guys. 3 had half isaroin, and the chametz had an isaroin. So obviously it's what? It's toida gedoyla. It's the gedoyla of the toidas. It's the gedoyla of the breads of the toida. So I'm good. It's a very geshmak. So in other words, you didn't walk around with the animals. You walked around with and which would you walk around with? You walked around with what? With chametz. Now, there's only 2 chametz that's brought on in the mizbeach. One is the korban toida, and the second one is coming up right now. As Baruch's going like that. You have the shtei lechem that were brought on Shevuous. On Shevuous, they would bring the shtei lechem. So we'll get to we have a second. We'll get to it in a second. Says the Gemara. So Amaron Verchama Ein Azara Miskadeshes El B'Shiyarei Mincha. The Azara was not shtei toidos, which is kachim kalim. It was with Shiyarei Mincha, which is kachim kadashim. Fellas, the kohen would take a kamitza, and that kamitza he would burn on the mizbeach. What he took it from is called the shiyarei mincha. It's din a kachei kadashim. It can only be eaten in by the azara, by the kahanim, and only the male kahanim. That the extra was used to expand the azara itself. What we're speaking about, the shtei chales, as we saw from the Nehemiah, is speaking about expanding Yerushalayim. But this is speaking about expanding the azara. That Rami Bar Chama says was not accomplished with the shtei toidos. That was accomplished with what? With the sheri mincha. My timer ki Yerushalayim. My Yerushalayim daba nechel ba mikatsha. Just like Yerushalayim, the object that you can eat in it, such as the lachmei toida, is mikadeshit. Afazara daba nechel ba mikatsha, which is what? Which is the sheri mincha. Atu lachmei toida bazar miloy mesachle. When he talking, right? Could you eat the lachmi toida in the azara? Of course you could. Of course you could. So, what are you telling me? Why can't you use lachmi toida? You can eat that as well. El eliki Yerushalayim. Ma Yerushalayim daba nechal ba v'yoytzim imena nifsal. And you go out from it, it's going to become puzzle. Af azara daba nechal ba v'yoytzim imena nifsal. So, guys, if you walk out of Yerushalayim with the lachmi toida, they become puzzle. If you walk out of Sheri Mincha from the Azara, it becomes puzzle. If you walk out from the Lachmei Torah, that Azara, it's not puzzle, it's still in Yerushalayim. So Memelo, we laid through that new Nakuda, that little Nakuda, that goes ahead and explains the difference of Rami Bar Chama, why the expansion of Yerushalayim was Shiori, of the Beis Hamikdash was Shiori Mincha, and the Lachmei Torah was Yerushalayim. Right? If you're going all the way, why don't you say just like Lachmei Torah is Chametz, so to the Kodesh Kedoshim is Chametz? Says the Gemara, V'tizbra, minchas chametz miyika. Do you find a mincha that's chametz? Amid days. V'chi tema the machmetz lahul shirayim. In other words, I know I cannot bring on the mizbeach chametz. Kol sa'ar v'chol devash lo saktiru. Kol sa'ar, anything that's sourdough, anything that's chametz. V'chol devash, any fruit, lo saktiru, I can't bring. But that's speaking about the kamitza fellas. Maybe the kahanim, they can go ahead and make themselves a nice kugel, right? They can make themselves a nice, a nice pancake, yeah, and let it become chametz. So now we're going to prove it not. That you made the shirayim chametz or makadesh bahu, and you use that to be makadesh the azara. V'kasiv, the pasuk says, it says, "Leisi afa chametz chelkam." You should be a chelik. The chelik of the kahanim can also not be chametz. Not only leisaktiru, what you put on the mizbeach, but even so. In other words, it's a moot point. How could you think that just like lachmi toidus chametz, the shiori mincha? In other words, it doesn't exist. There's no such. I'm not going to use the word animal because it makes no sense. There's no such flower. There's no such flower that's chametz, right? It doesn't work. Even the chelik kahanim should not be chametz. Says the Gemara, Alam Aloi, you mean there's no Kachik Kedoshim that is not what? That's not Chametz? And now let me give you a little preview of the daf. Okay, guys. On Kam Shevuous, we know that the Chodosh could not be eaten in the Medina until the Omer is brought. The Omer is brought from barley on Tesai in Nisan, that matters the Chodosh in the Medina. In the Beis HaMikdash, you could not, it was brought from barley. In the Beis HaMikdash, you could not go ahead and use Chodosh until the Shtei Lechem was brought on Shevuous. The Shtei Lechem on Shevuous, fellas, matted the Chodosh in the Beis HaMikdash. It, however, was not bought from Eichel Behema of barley. It was bought from Eichel Adam from wheat. It was bought from wheat. There were two lachmois. They were both chametz. They accompanied the Kivtzei Atzeres. The Kivtzei Atzeres are two korban shlomim that were bought on Shevuous. They're unique because they're the only shlomim fellas that are kachei kedoshim. They're only the Kivtzei Atzeres are what a kodesh kedoshim. So now the Gemara says, you want a case, fellas, of what? Of chametz of kachei kedoshim, and you couldn't find the case? I have a case. The shtei lechem is kodesh kedoshim, and therefore maybe you'll use the shtei lechem to expand the Beis Hamikdash proper. The Gemara is going to go ahead now and delve into any possibility of doing it, and we're going to reject it because it's not possible. In other words, we're not going to find the Heichet Timtza that you possibly could use they can possibly use the Shtei Lechem, so Al Korchach, you're left over with the Shiori Mincha, which is not Chametz. Good? That's what we're going to do right now. Alam Eloi, you mean to tell me there's no case of what? Of Lechem that is not what? That is not Chametz? Of Kachei Kedoshim, Efshad Mekadesh B'Shtei Lechem, right? Be'at Seres. Go ahead, wait till Shevuous, and then you'll use the Lachmei, the Shtei Lechem. It'll be similar to Lachmei Toida, that it's Chametz, and use that. Says Gemara Mishnah Lo Yefshad. It's not possible. It's not possible to have the Shtei Lechem being able to use conventionally to expand. Why? Hechi never. What are you going to do? Nivnaya meyetmo, v'nigdashe meyetmo. Go ahead, build the extension to the Beis Hamikdash before Shevuous. be mekadesh to shei lechem before Shevuous, and they'll go ahead what and walk around with it, and then you'll have the comparison to lachmei toida that they're both chametz. 1 second, that's a no go. Shtei alechem b'shchitas kvasim huk dekatshe. You know when the shtei lechem get the kedusha fellas? Only with the shchita of what of the shtei kvasim, and the shtei kvasim can't be bought until Shavuos proper. So you don't have a possibility of going ahead and jumping the gun. Okay, build it before Shavuos. V'nigdashei ha'idna, and go ahead and be makadosh it now on Shavuos. Says Rabbi in kiddush b'shas habinyan. You need the kiddush b'shas habinyan. In other words, nivnaya b'yomtiv. Go ahead, build it on yontif. V'nikadshe b'yontif, and go ahead and use the shtei lechem which will kodesh on yontif and expand. Ain't binyan migdash doicha yontif. Binyan beis hamikdash. Just like Shabbos is not doicha. Just like binyan beis hamikdash is not doicha Shabbos. Binyan beis hamikdash is not the sugi vesi dochalos. I say it's not doicha. But Rashi brings it. Okay. Let's see Rashi for a second. Ain't binyan beis hamikdash doichas yontif. Kedaminu b'yavamis perakama. Yachal yehei binyan beis hamikdash doicha Shabbos. Tamad loymar. Hashem saysay tishmoiru. Umukdashay tirau. Ani Hashem. Kulchem chayav mechvoidi. Atem. Atem. Umam kadesh chayav mechvoidi. Bezarti ala hashavas v'yom tovim nami v'shvas. We call yom tovim. We call Shabbos. There's an Indian of shvisa of resting. So therefore, you can't do it. Okay. So therefore, right now, I've exhausted the possibilities. One more possibility. Nishavka lebasa hachi v'nivnaya v'nigdasha. So leave it till after Yontif. Build it after Yontif. And then use the shtei lechem to go ahead, that you was magdash it on Yontif. So let's say, guys, Shavuos comes, Motzei Shavuos, let's say the next day, build, and you have kodesh tikka lechem now, and go ahead and expand. It says, if Shalabelina, it's once nighttime comes, once the next day comes, it's puzzle. You know, the shtei lechem is puzzle. This is the last one. Yuma, go ahead and build the whole thing Erev Yontif. Finishayaba Purta, leave over one brick, leave over a little bit. Comes Motzei Yontif, you'll finish it up. And still, guys, Motzei Yontif, as of yet, the Shtei Kvasim we're not Lina yet, because it's still nighttime. And you'll go ahead, and then you'll be Magdashit. So L'chayr, you have an Eitzah with Chametz. Says Gemara, the Ad the Kodesh Yuma La'alta Nigmrei, V'nigdashay, until the next day, right? It's Kodesh. Says Gemara, ain't binyan beis hamikdash b'layla. Can't build the beis hamikdash at night. Dam Rabbi, menayin shein binyan beis hamikdash b'layla shnemar u'v'yoyim hokem es hamishkan v'yom hakimu b'layla im hakimu hilkach le'efshar. Therefore, you've exhausted. The Gemara beautifully has exhausted every single possibility of using the shtei lechem. So even though you're zustelling the Azara, Rami Bar Chum is saying the Azara is not with the lachmei toida. It's with the Shiori Mincha. It's not like the Lachmei Toida, it's not Chametz, because there is no Kodesh Kadoshim to go ahead and be Magdish any expansion, because it's not possible. Because the only other Chametz there is the Shtei Lechem, and we've exhausted every single possibility to possibly go ahead and use that as a means of being Magdish the extra area. Okay? Now we said Ubishir. Okay? We said Ubishir, the Levium would be Bashir. So what shir would they go ahead and sing? They're walking around. What exactly are they singing? Okay? What exactly are they singing? So Tan Rabbanon, Shir Shel Taida. They sing the shir of Taida. What's the shir of Taida? Says Rashi. Hayoimim Shem Sham B'Kinoiros Umar Shir Shel Taida Mizal Saida. Mizal Saida that we say every day. Mizal Saida. That's a shir of Taida. Right. B'Kinoiros u'B'Nevalim u'B'Tzeltzelim. They would go ahead and they use Kinoiros. They use Nevalim. It's different types of instruments. I'll call Pina, every single corner. They'll call Evan Gedailah Sheb Yerushalayim, and every big stone in Yerushalayim, the Yomer, and they'd also say Arim Hashem Kidili Sani. Like David said, right? Arim Hashem, that Kodesh Baruch Hu, right? This is Mizmor Shech Chanukas Habayis to David. Arim Hashem Kidili Sani. You say it every day. That right? But the Shel Pigoyim, and they said the shir Shel Pigoyim are Mazikim, demons. V'yesh oimim shesh on the goyim. It's all the same one. It's Yoshi b'seis el yoim. It's Yoshi b'seis el yoim. Man da'am in the goyim. One says Nagayim, the share of Nagayim. Ichsiv v'nega la yikrav ba'alecha. Uman da'am goyim. It also says Ichsiv kipo mitzitcha elef. Okay. V'oime Yoshi b'seis el yoim b'shel shadai yisloinan. Ad ki ata Hashem machsi el yoin samta ma'onecha. You have Hashem from your high in your dwelling place. V'choizu amar. Mizmor David b'varchu pnei Hashalom b'noy. I don't know why they said that. I guess that's why the Gemara takes it out. Ad Hashem Yeshua lamcha b'chasecha tela. That's what they say. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, Amalahu lahani kroyi v'goni. He would say these psukim. He would say Yoshe b'selsa, and then what? He would go to sleep. Says the Gemara, Hechi Ovid Hachi. How could Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi do this? Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi himself, Asal is Rappais b'divrei Torah. It's mashma that this pasuk is used as what as a sleep aid. I'll tell you a story in a second. That's used as a sleep aid. It says lahagin shiny. Go ahead and protect you is different. So when they say it's asa, that means when there's a makkah. So either ikamaka asa v'suloi, right? But nan haloichish al makkah in lechelik al haba. Anyone who incants over a makkah loses his chelik in the next world. Ha'idmar lo am Rabbi Yochanan b'roi kekshana tztafka where he spits. So therefore, he would say Yoshe would say El Yoim as the ways to be mugging. You talk about a sleep aid. I think I told you the story. I'm not sure I have it on tape, but it's a very funny story. We'll have it for. I get one day in the mail. I get a letter. It says to Rabbi Stern with my address. There is nothing written. Piece of paper. I open it up. There's something that looks like a tooth, and it says Ayin Shabbos. I think. Ayin something or Samach something. One of the. Okay. The next thing I know, I look it up and it says that a fox tooth is good for sleeping. It's a fox tooth. You want to sleep as a fox tooth. I said, how did I get a fox tooth? A minute later, I get a video. My Stern, my kid, was driving in a pickup truck on the Palisades. His friend, and he said he sees roadkill. He says, "Stop the car." Moish picks up a dead fox, throws it in the back of the truck, and he's sawing off the fox tooth with a saw. So people think my son's crazy. I'm this spoiled that this is what he saw. He saw roadkill, and he remembered a Gemara in Shabbos. I think it's a Gavaldik the hair. Who would think about that? He saw roadkill. So to this day, my wife went ahead, sewed in my pillow underneath a fox tooth. Together with Ambien, it works well.